Hello and welcome. If you're watching this video, then that means that you're either interested in learning how to program or you want to learn how to program and then take it a bit further in learning game development. So, over the last 5 years, I've been wanting to learn game development and have learned a lot in game development. But my journey towards learning how to learning how to develop video games has led to a lot of digging around on the internet to find the right resources to do specific things. So, what I wanted to do was just take a few minutes to kind of show you what I've learned and kind of lay things out in a roadmap, as well as lay the roadmap for what my tutorials and lessons are going to be about. So, when you look at game development, there are really kind of three pieces to game development there's audio, there's visual art, such as 2D and 3D, and there's programming. When you put all three of these together, you basically have almost everything that you need to make a video game. If there's anything else, I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but I'm sure that there's a lot more that you could do. But these are the three critical categories to making a full and complete video game. So, why am I making a video game tutorial, or at least a programming tutorial? Because I find that video game development tends to be kind of like, in my personal opinion, this is just my opinion, the I don't want to say pinnacle, but the peak or the in my opinion one of the most challenging things to make with programming. So if you can learn how to program and you can learn game development, I'm pretty sure you would have more than enough skills to go out and make other things such as desktop applications, phone apps, web apps, and so on. So by doing this, we learn things like audio, visual, and code. We can apply it to just about everywhere. So I won't be able to go over everything that there is to go over when it comes to game development. However, what I will be doing is teaching a programming route. But before I get there, I want to show you what I recommend you use when learning how to program or learning how to develop games. So if we start off, let's start off with the audio. Oddly enough, audio it was actually the last thing I learned. So if you want to make your own music, let's say for a platformer, right, a 2D platform, you got a boss fight and you want your own music. You don't want to go online and try to download somebody else's songs. You want to make your own. In order to do that, you're going to need what's called a DAW, a digital audio workstation. Now, there are a lot of DAWs that exist out there, such as Ableton Live, Music Maker, GarageBand, and one of the most famous ones is Fruity Loops. These are all paid for programs. GarageBand, I think, comes free maybe with Apple, with your Mac computer. I'm not entirely sure, but I know that the rest of them you have to pay for. And the key theme with all of these programs I'm going to recommend is they're all free. So everything you see here is just a free software. So we're going to make a video game using nothing but free software because we're all cheap. I'm cheap. I'm broke. I don't know about you. So the one DAW I recommend using is LMMS, stands for Linux Multimedia Studio. It has everything you need to make a song from scratch. It may not be as powerful as some of these paid softwares, but I haven't seen anything that it lacks yet. But then again, I'm not a music savant by any means. I don't sit and do a lot of audio engineering. So take that with a grain of salt. But I know that LMMS has been great so far, but just opening LMMS is not going to be enough. By the way, despite its name, LMMS, Linux Multimedia Studio, there's obviously a free version that you can download and install for Windows, and it works great. In order to learn how to use LMMS, I would recommend TJ Free. I'll put a link in the description, but TJ Free has an excellent playlist tutorial on how to use LMMS, make songs, make compositions, how to, add filters and how to control the volume, etc. They're excellent and they should get you more than enough of the way to where you need to be. I also recently found a YouTube channel called In the Mix with Michael. Now his channel is a bit different. It doesn't have to do with LMMS directly, but instead his channel focuses on audio engineering. So he teaches you more of how to create sounds from scratch or from recordings. So TJ Free teaches you how to use LMS with sounds that are already made in order to create songs and how to compose them. But in the mix, will teach you how to create just about any sound you want. If you want to start off with a sound that you want to record, I would highly recommend Audacity. But Audacity is not going to have the kind of power that you're going to see like with LMMS. When it comes to the visual art portion, obviously, it's going to depend on whether or not you're making a 2D or 3D game. For 2D games, the best free software I could find was Piskel. Piskel is a very easy to use. Again, it's not the most powerful, and there are some other ones that are paid, and they only cost like $15. You can go online and look for some of those if you're willing to fork up the 15 bucks. That's fine. But if you want to stay with the theme of being free software or using free software, then Piskel is the way you want to go. I may or may not make a simple tutorial with Piskel, but if I do decide, it'll either be a one-off or its own playlist. It won't be a part of this playlist. However, I do know that today's Tuts, I hope I'm saying that right, they have a tutorial on YouTube on how to use Piskel. And if you want to learn how to make sprites or animations or anything like that, download Piskel, go to YouTube, go to his channel, take a look, and learn it that way. For 3D, there is no better software than Blender, for free at least. I've never actually tried any of the paid software because they're quite expensive. But Blender is completely free, and I believe it was 3.2, where it was considered a professional grade software. So it has everything you would ever need. There are actually some really beautiful videos that have been made, like some animation shorts that have been made by creators that you can look on the Blender website. But if you want to learn how to use Blender, the best place to start would be Blender Guru. Blender Guru is the tutorial that I learned how to use Blender, and they're long tutorials, but if you really stick with it, you can learn a ton. His tutorials tend to be more based around sculpting and not so much animation, but he does have a few loose videos in there about animation. He does have a beginner, intermediate, and expert course that I recommend you watch as well. But the beginner course that he has, the playlist, which I'll also link in the description, is where I started, and it's where I would recommend you start as well. Grant Abbott's channel, on the other hand, is where I learned how to do most of my animation kind of learning. So the Blender Guru's donut tutorial specifically is really great for teaching you all the concepts of how to use Blender and how to sculpt correctly. Because a lot of people tend to not do it completely right, which is no insult to them. It's just, he does teach you the proper way of doing things. And then once you learn how to sculpt, like let's say a player character, you can go to Grant Abbott's channel where he can teach you how to rig and animate your first character, for example. And once you got that down, you could pretty much figure out a lot more from there. There are a bunch of other unique animation tutorials out there that are for things like how to make things morph or squish or stretch. But Grant Abbott's channel, that I use that one to learn how to animate my first character. And that's where I would recommend you go from there. His channel does kind of assume that you have some pre-knowledge or predetermined understanding of how to use Blender, since his videos are more one-offs and not entire playlists. Unless he has one that I didn't see, that could just be an oversight on my part. But when looking at his animation videos, they assumed that I already knew how to use Blender pretty well. So I would still recommend you do Blender Guru's donut tutorial first, and then learn animation from Grant Abbott afterwards. Okay, so for programming, this is where I come in. I taught myself how to program, ironically, after college. I probably should have been a programmer, but that's okay. I like doing it as a hobby. But I could never find any really good training tutorials online. If I ever went onto YouTube, I always found like these one-off videos that either didn't answer my question or were so specific, or they showed you how to type something out but didn't explain what the heck was even going on, so you couldn't really use it in the future. It's just, here's some code, copy paste it, or just follow along and ta-da, your code will work. I didn't like that. So I took the time to buy a book, sit down, read it, and learn it. And luckily, I have a roommate and longtime friend who has greatly helped me progress in my understanding of programming. So what I wanted to do was to kind of give back and fill in that void in the programming kind of roadmap. So what I'm going to do is create a playlist here on YouTube, and it's going to be programming. First, we're going to start simple by just doing some object-oriented programming, which it's not going to be, that in and of itself is not simple, but when I say simple, I mean just the programming. We're not doing any programming with GUIs or programming with Godot or any game engine or anything like that. We're just going to learn how programs and software work. So I'll start off in Java, but please remember that this is not going to be a tutorial on how to use Java. Java is just the language that I've decided to start with for a number of reasons. And the reasons will be described in the first video of the playlist. But we're going to start with Java just to learn object-oriented programming. Object-oriented programming is an idea. It's not Java, it's not C#, it's not C++, it's an idea. It's an idea that is used by all these different languages. Excuse me. So we're going to start off with Java, and I'm going to walk you through a admittedly long tutorial, but it's going to be very informative, and it's going to actually tell you how software development works and how object-oriented programming works, and it's knowledge that you can apply anywhere. By the end of the Java tutorial, you'll easily be able to pick up C#, which is actually something we're going to do. Once we're done with Java and we've learned enough about object-oriented programming, I'm going to shift down here to C#, and we're going to use Visual Studio to just make some simple user interfaces. And I want to show you this. I'm switching over to C# for two reasons. The first is because I want to show you how easy it is to move on to new languages once you understand object-oriented programming. The second is because using Visual Studio with C# is a very commonly used tool, Visual Studio is, and a very commonly used language. Also, learning C# will also help you get into Unity if that's the way you want to go, since it is the preferred language with Unity. Once we're done with that, once I show you how to do a whole bunch of stuff with programming and graphical user interfaces on Visual Studio using C#, that's when we're going to shift things over to game development and really use everything that you see up here, combine it together to make a video game. Now, me personally, I'm going to use Godot. And the reason I'm going to use the Godot is to stick with the theme of being free. Now, all four of these are kind of free. Unity is free, but if you ever do release a game, you do have to pay them a certain amount up to a certain cap. I believe it's $3,000. I could be wrong. It could change by the time this video comes out, but that's how it's quote unquote free. It is free in its entirety up until you start making money off of it. Then you have to pay for it, which is okay for a lot of people. You can either pay $3,000 up front, or you can give them a portion of every sale until you hit that 3,000 mark, and then the rest is yours. It's actually a really good business model for them, but I chose not to use it for a number of reasons, and Godot is an up-and-coming, very awesome game engine that I want to use. I've dabbled with Unreal Engine before. I didn't really enjoy it too much. It was a lot to learn, but to be fair, I didn't give it a really good, solid chance. But I do know that it is also a free engine. It has a similar business model as Unity. Go ahead and try that if that's kind of the route you want to go. The key thing with Unreal versus Unity versus Godot is that as you go up this kind of ladder from Godot to Unity, Unreal to CryEngine, supposedly the engines become more and more powerful, but they also require more and more resources and all this other stuff. So far, I have not been disappointed with Godot. It may not be able to do as much as Unreal Engine or CryEngine or maybe even Unity, but I haven't seen any severe limitations yet in my usage of Godot. Last is CryEngine, and I'm just going to touch on that. I tried to give that a solid chance. Some gripes I had with that is that when you open a new project, it does throw errors immediately, and I did not like that. Even though CryEngine is free, I believe you have to pay for third-party software in order to get it to work. So the game engine is just a game engine. The rendering, you have to, I think, pay for like a graphics rendering engine separately and kind of merge the two together. It gets really messy. It's really sloppy. I didn't like CryEngine personally. it is considered to be, out of all four of these, the most powerful of the game engines. So if you really want something to look really stunning and you want the most powerful engine that you can get, CryEngine might be the way you want to go. But from what I understand, you do have to pay for add-ons and so on. I don't want to get too far down that rabbit hole. Anyways, going back, I'm going to be showing you Godot. I might make. I think I'm gonna. I've decided that we're gonna make a Rubik's Cube game, and the reason we're gonna make a Rubik's Cube game is because it was a game that I made a long time ago, and I learned a lot from that game, and that's what I want to share with you guys when we make that game. We will use obviously 3D, so we'll make a Rubik's Cube in Blender, import it into Godot, program the game with the menu and everything. Maybe we'll make a simple soundtrack and then throw that in there too, so when someone's playing, they can have something to listen to. And then we'll put everything together from programming to the 3D modeling of the Rubik's Cube and maybe a song from LMMS, a simple tune, and we will output our own video game. I may make some intermediate courses if I kind of think of something in the future. But as for now, that's where I would recommend everybody kind of start. For the audio LMMS, for 2D Piskel, for Blender for 3D, Blender for 3D, and I'm going to start a programming tutorial with Java. But I promise you that again, you're not here to learn Java, you're here to learn object-oriented programming because that's used everywhere. Okay, so if you have any questions or any recommendations, if you have any other, software that you would recommend that's potentially free, hopefully free, because remember some of these softwares can get really expensive. But if you have any suggestions or recommendations, put them in the comments. I'll respond to them. I'm more than willing to remake this video to make it better. I'm also not the most artistic person in the world, which is why you're staring at a single image. But if you guys have any suggestions, please let me know in the comments.